Okay, I'm getting a challenge from a 1500 Night Owl 333, so I'm thinking, why not? We can definitely accept 1518, and let's roll the cameras. E4. I guess this is a sub, which is, I guess, fine with me since the rating kind of fits. Okay, so we're facing a Sicilian, and once again, we go C3, we go for the Alapin, which is what we've been doing this entire time. Okay, D5. Okay, so D5 is one of the two main lines. He takes D5, Queen takes D5, D4. We've had this 1,000 times on the speed run, and now Black generally goes Knight F6 or Knight C6. Those are the two main moves. And as is often the case in the Alapin, you have this tension between the C5 pawn and the C3 pawn, and it's not usually a good idea for Black to take on D4 prematurely because it opens up the C3 square for White's knight. Okay, so Knight C6, Knight F3. And here, I mean, there's Bishop G4, that you can bring the other knight out to F6. You can play E6. I mean, there's a lot of possible moves for Black. But a lot of people really under 2000 are not intimately familiar with the theory here. And if Black isn't familiar with the theory, he can get in some trouble because that queen on D5 is both really a strength and a weakness at the same time. It's controlling a lot of squares, but it is incredibly vulnerable if we can get a bishop to C4. All right, so in this position, there are a couple of possible moves. I think the move that I have previously played in the 5-minute speedrun is the first speedrun. I meant to say is Bishop E2. Bishop E2 is what most of you guys are probably thinking of, but it's actually not the only move. And there is a move which is, in my opinion, a lot more dangerous if Black doesn't know the theory. Does anybody know what move I'm talking about? Now, this move essentially kills two birds with one stone. It simultaneously guards against bishop takes f3, which would ruin White's pawn structure. Okay, you guys are on the right track. Knight a3 is the right idea. The only thing you want to do is do the same thing, but reinforce the knight on f3, and the move is knight bd2. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, wait a second, now we don't have the connection anymore between White's queen and the d4 pawn. Can't Black simply take on d4 and win a pawn? Well, he can, but that's why we play knight bd2. We sacrifice the pawn, and we do so in order to get very rapid development for our pieces. And after c takes d4, think about what White's going to do. What is the idea of knight bd2? Is it just to recapture the pawn on d4? No, it's not. Who can tell me what our follow-up is going to be against virtually all of Black's moves, with the exception of bishop takes f3? It's going to be bishop c4. We're going to start developing with tempo. And then our queen from d1 can later come out to b3. You should already be thinking about that move because b7 is vulnerable and f7 is also going to be vulnerable. Does it matter that this blocks in the bishop? I mean, it always matters, right? It's a drawback. It's a drawback of this line that it blocks in the bishop, but we are prioritizing the development of our other pieces. Now, I will be honest, I don't remember the theory of this line too well. But we're going to reconstruct it. Knight f6. Okay, that does not fundamentally change what we want to do. So we clearly want to go bishop c4 and follow our plan. Hit the queen. Okay, bishop takes f3. I was expecting that. And this leads to a very interesting point in the game where we have to decide on our subsequent course of action. Yeah, well, here's the thing, guys. Queen takes f3 allows a queen trade. And I'm not a huge fan of a queen trade here because that essentially neutralizes our initiative. I would seriously consider, first of all, taking with a pawn on f3. That's very risky, but it might also pay off tremendously because later on we can go queen b3 and essentially hit both of these pawns at the same time. But there is a third move, which you guys are indicating, which is actually queen b3, simply ignoring the bishop on f3 entirely. Now, what's important to establish there is that Black's queen cannot escape with check. If it could, queen b3 would be out of the question. But this square is controlled by the knight, this square is controlled by the pawn, and e6 is obviously controlled by the bishop. So I really like the move queen b3. As far as I remember, this might be theory. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm messing it up. Maybe I'm messing it up, but then I want my opponent to punish me. So We'll see. We'll see how this goes. And again, the point is that once the queen moves, I'm sure this is probably theory. I'm sure this has been analyzed. We can then either, take on f7 with check, or we can potentially take on b7. But most likely, we're going to take the bishop on f3, recapture it with our knight, and we've done so while preserving the queens on the board. And our initiative is going to be tremendous because his king is nowhere near castling short. I mean, he's going to have to go 1, 2, 3 moves before black escapes the center, assuming that black doesn't want to castle long, which just seems very, very dangerous given that black has already exposed the queen side with the move c5. Yeah, what about knight a5? Some people are asking. Well, knight a5, there's a couple of things that we can do there. The first is that we can move the queen away with check. We can move the queen away with check. And then black is going to cover with his queen, and it leads to a very complicated position. So we'll cross that bridge if we get there. We don't win the queen. We do not win the queen after knight a5 because his queen is going to be able to cover the check on a4 or b5. So you guys might say, wait a second, knight a5, queen a4 check, queen drops back to d7, and we say, oh, we win the queen with bishop b5. But remember, pins can be blocked, and that bishop from f3 can return back to c6, cover the pin, and black is going to emerge a piece up. And that's exactly what happens. Okay. I think knight a5 is a very, very strong move. I think it's actually the only move to keep black in the game. So let's try to assess the options, make sense of the position. This position is not quite as complicated as it appears. If we give a check with the bishop, that's very bad, because then the king simply moves aside to d8. The king simply moves aside to d8. And remember, our queen is going to be hanging. And after bishop b5, king d8, queen takes d5, the bishop from f3 can recapture on d5, and black is up a piece. If we take on d5 here, black is going to take on b3 and attack our rook on a1, which means that in that position, we are going to have to take that knight on b3, but then black takes on g2, and the minor pieces are equal, but black is going to be up a pawn. That's also not something that appeals to us, and so we kind of have to give a check with the queen. Now, where do we give it? Between these two squares, I prefer queen b5 check, because after queen a4 check, queen d7, it transpires that our queen is undefended. But after we give this check, and black covers with his queen, we don't have to move the queen from b5 at all. We can take on f3 with the knight, and the position, the smoke finally clears. And I still think that we're going to be a little bit better on account of the fact that, okay, scratch all of that. I was not expecting queen c6, and I think this is a mistake. Now, it's very important, right, to constantly be reassessing your conclusions about the position, especially if you're faced with an unexpected move. Well, how does the position change as a result of this move as opposed to queen d7? Well, what did I mention about queen d7? I mentioned that queen d7 leaves the c6 square open for the bishop to come back and cover a potential pin. Now, here you might say, well, wait a minute. If our queen has gone from b5, bishop b5 is going to be a far more serious threat. And so we now have the option of playing queen takes a5. Now, we have to check here that black has no additional checks on the e-file because they could lead to checkmate, but he doesn't. And that's exactly what we do. We take the knight with the threat of bishop b5. Very, very complicated position. He goes b6, which was expected. Now, what should we do? What should we do? There's a very important follow-up move here. Yeah, of course, queen a6. Once again, preserving the threat of bishop b5. Now, if black plays this very astutely, the game is far, far from over. But our opponent has to keep his composure and find the correct sequence of moves. Let's see if he's going to be able to do that. And, as he's thinking, try to put yourself in black's shoes and ask yourself how you make the most out of the situation Not like that. Not queen b7. This is, in my opinion, one of the biggest weaknesses that people in this rating range tend to experience. 1500, 1600, when faced with something that looks like it may end the game, such as they're losing their queen, that panic creeps in, and then, and then they don't end up putting a lot of resistance. And how do we actually win the game here? What's White's simplest move? Well, we don't have to do anything with our queen. It's defended by the bishop. We can just take Black's bishop on f3, emerging up a piece. That's it. The game is over. And only 12 moves, but a lot happened in those 12 moves. So I'll show you after the game. Please be patient. I will talk about what Black should have done after the game. And there is a concept that I've mentioned before, which would really help you to find the best defensive option. Yeah, this is resignable. I mean, this is just a full extra piece. And to make matters worse, Black's king is just still stuck in the center. And look at these light squares. We're going to return to b5 with check on the next move. Yeah, the bishop b5 check is a great move. We can also play bishop f4 and get this bishop out. It really doesn't matter at this point. Let's go bishop b5 check just to make sure the king stays in the center. And even though it's the end game, we've got plenty of pieces that we can use to attack. And case in point, in this position, once the king moves to d8, you should automatically be considering what move. I'm not bulleting it out, Creed. I'm playing a little bit faster here, but it really is the case that I think the moves are a lot easier to understand once you're up a piece. And making the quote-unquote correct move matters a lot less. There's a big set of moves that are possible. Knight e5 is correct. Hitting the pawn on f7. I mean, anytime there's the king on d8 and the rook on h8, you have to look for knight e5 and knight g5. You just got to manually consider that move. Okay, great game. So, Alapin, Sicilian, knight c6, knight f3, bishop g4, knight bd2, knight f6, and let's get right to the meat. Bishop c4. And bishop takes f3. Now, to be honest, I underestimated bishop takes f3. And after queen b3, I do believe that Black had a move here, which I initially completely missed. And I think it would have given Black maybe even an advantage. And so it is possible that bishop c4 is a mistake. I might have confused the theory. And now that I think about it, it may be the case that d takes c5 is the move. I'm not totally sure. I'll have to look it up. Okay, so I am looking it up. No, it is the move. Bishop c4. Bishop takes f3. Queen b3. Oh, no, I guess I'm wrong. So knight a5 is the main move. But there is an alternative. And by talking about this alternative, you are going to help yourself understand where Black could have improved instead of giving up a piece. Who can tell me an alternative to knight a5? And this is a hard move to see. Very hard move to see. Why is it hard to see? Because you're taught from the moment that you start playing chess that the last thing you want to do is give away your queen. Blundering your queen is the worst thing that you can do. And so a lot of players, when they hit 1400, they develop this irrational fear of anything that involves sacrificing their queen. And they are blind to options that involve giving away your queen for a lot of material, right? You're just not considering it because you're thinking of it as giving away your queen. But if you consider it, what about bishop takes g2? Well, what happens there? Bishop takes d5. Now, you don't just rush to take the rook on h1. That's terrible. What does Black do? Yeah, this is still theory. I see 7 games in the database here. What does Black play here? Well, the move is easy. Just, bishop takes d5. And then the funny thing is, after queen takes b7, Black has this move, knight takes d4. Black has this move, knight takes d4. Which leads to ridiculous complications. I see 4 games with queen a6, knight c2 check, king e2, knight takes a1. Both rooks are hanging. And you get a completely irrational position where Black is technically up material. Black has 2 pieces and a rook for the queen, but Black is completely undeveloped on the king side. And the king is stuck in the center. It looks like White is achieving success in this line. And this is a perfect line to analyze with an engine. I mean, people watching on YouTube, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you could just analyze this position with the computer for 5-10 minutes and kind of get your bearings. I also don't know what's going on here. I don't even know who's better. This is an impossible position for humans to evaluate. If I had to say, I would probably give my preference to white just because black's king is so weak, black's knight on a1 is trapped, and I think it's practically speaking easier to play this for white. In addition, knight c2 is never a possibility because of queen a4 check, forking the knight and the king. So that's how the existing games have gone in this line. I also don't understand why in this position black can't consider rook b8, hitting the queen. I mean, it's the same idea. The queen moves, and then you take the rook on h1. Oh, I guess the reason is, queen c7, bishop takes h1, and who can tell me a crucial move here for white? Crucial move. And I've talked about this a lot even in today's video on puzzle solving. Anytime there's a big distance between two pieces that defend each other, consider moves that sever the connection between them. f3, very good. And black cannot defend everything. The bishop is trapped. The knight on c6 is toast. I mean, black is busted. Rook b6, d takes c5. Rook a6 and queen c8 would win the rook. So I guess this line is good for white, but this existed. All right, so knight a5 is the main move. Queen b5 check. And here I think black made a serious mistake. Yeah, so the move is queen d7. And once again, if white plays queen takes a5 here, then after bishop g2, bishop b5, black has this additional resource of going bishop c6. And black is in great shape. Right? So the main line here is knight takes f3, knight takes c4, queen takes c4. Finally, things fizzle out a little bit. You get this kind of position where I think that white is maybe a tiny bit better because white is closer to castling, but black should be able to equalize. e6, bishop e7, castles, and you've got a pretty symmetrical position with no piece imbalances. So there's a question about bishop takes f7. No. Remember, the knight is not on f3 yet, so bishop f7 doesn't actually give anything because the knight can't get to e5 in time. All right? So queen c6 is a very big mistake because now bishop b5 is a threat. But in this position, and b6, queen a6, I don't really know who this favors, but the same resource existed for black both of these times. Now that we looked at the previous line, who can tell me how black can make the most out of this situation, or at least try? I see now that this probably does not help, but at least it gives black some chances. Very good. Bishop takes g2. No, guys, if you move the queen, you give up the bishop, right? You can't just give up a complete bishop for nothing. You have to instead give up the queen for as much as you can get for it. Bishop takes g2, bishop b5, bishop takes h1, and guess what? If white immediately takes on c6, which most people would, after bishop takes c6, yeah, white can also take on c5 because this is pinned. White is undoubtedly probably winning, but black has a lot of stuff for the queen. However, as we already know, white is in no rush to take the queen, and white can insert the move f3. I think this is the reason why white is simply winning. Again, black now has to give up the queen for the bishop. If you take on f3, then knight takes f3 and the queen is pinned. If you don't take on f3, if you take on b5, for example, then after queen takes b5 check, king d8, I think the simplest way of winning this bishop, actually you have the move queen back to f1, winning the bishop on the spot. So I guess black's position is already hopeless after queen c6, but this should have been tried. And after queen b7, this is a full piece up, and black loses on the spot. Why not bishop b5 instead of queen a6? Well, if you play bishop b5 here, then black is going to take the queen. And then once you take black's queen, black is able to take that bishop with his bishop, and at the end of the day, black is up a piece. So there's no hurry to play bishop b5. The point is that you have to move your queen away first, and black is unable to defend against two threats at the same time. That's all it is. This is threat number one, and then this is threat number two, and one of these is going to happen. And by playing queen d7, black ensures that he doesn't have to defend against bishop b5 because of bishop c6. These tactical subtleties, the more experienced you are, the better you become at calculating, the more you solve, the easier it's going to be to make sense of these crazy positions. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're a relative beginner, don't be, because with experience, you're going to learn how to get your bearings in these positions, how to break it down into its component tactical parts. Okay. And that's about it. All right, guys, take care. Thank you so much for hanging out. Great stream today. Bye.